Joining us now is Democratic strategist and former New York State Senator David Carlucci. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour once again. Look, the big news of the week, of course, is US President Joe Biden pardoning his son Hunter Biden, who's guilty of federal tax and gun charges. And the pardon dates back to 2014, the same year that Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma. And it leaves the Democrats in a tough position. Here's Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer responding to questions.
Do you agree with some of your Democrat colleagues who say that President Biden's pardon of Hunter Biden was wrong or unwise, puts personal interest ahead of duty?
I got nothing for you on that.
Can I follow up on that? Are you concerned with the lack of transparency and lack of honesty around Biden's decision to pardon?
As I said, I got nothing for you on that. Nope.
Concerned that pardoning anyone on the way out of office, family members, sets a poor precedent.
Thank you. I've got nothing for you on that.
David, do you have anything for us on that?
Well, look, I agree with Senator Schumer. Just it's a distraction for what's he really going to say on this right now. I think Democrats, of course, many are disappointed with this action, but many Democrats also understand, and I think most Americans understand this situation that Joe Biden is in terms of wanting to do the right thing and protect his son. And the fear about what might happen going forward when the president leaves office and how his son would be a target for just inappropriate action. So I think right now we've got to focus on the future and see what can we do to take the politics out of the criminal justice system. And I don't have any answers right now, but I'm hopeful that Donald Trump uses that restraint and doesn't do what the Democrats fear. And that would do a lot to help quell those fears and distrust, I think, in the criminal justice system.
I understand the father-son thing, but it is an abuse of power. California Governor Gavin Newsom is breaking with Joe Biden over the decision to pardon his son Hunter, telling Politico that he was disappointed by the action. He said, "I took the president at his word, so by definition, I'm disappointed and can't support the decision." Let's just take a look at the president and the amount of times he told Americans he was not going to do this.
But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
From a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well,
I just said no. I just answered. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's all we kept hearing. We just kept hearing that he wasn't going to do this. But look, what do you make of Gavin Newsom's comments? Is this some sort of way of making it known that he's no longer a Biden Democrat?
I don't think so. I think this is what is great about the Democratic Party is that you don't have to agree on every single thing that somebody does, but you agree with them most of the time and you find a way forward. I think you're going to find this from many prominent Democrats that are going to agree with Gavin Newsom on this and say very disappointed. The president said one thing and then did the other. I can understand, and I think many Americans can understand why President Biden did it. And I think, yes, this is something that is unfortunate, but it was the president was between a rock and a hard place in terms of what he would do going forward. And I think the election results and the fact that President Trump is going to take office swayed President Biden's opinion and made him do what he ultimately did with this pardon.
But how damaging is this pardon for the Democrat Party? You know, Joe Biden really has not helped the Democrat Party. It's really throughout the election campaign and now this.
Yeah, I don't think it really does much to impact the Democratic Party. I think people are going to have different opinions on this. As he put in his letter on why he pardoned Hunter Biden, it was about a father-son relationship and how he wouldn't have been prosecuted in this way if his name was not Biden. And so I think Americans are going to have different views on this. What's more important is how this gets viewed in the future in terms of, yes, people are saying it sets a bad precedent, but that's up to the next administration to decide what they're going to do, and they'll be judged on that. I think what a lot of people are doing is exaggerating or is making this future vision down the road of what's going to happen extrapolating is the word I was looking for there in terms of what's going to happen because of this pardon. But that is yet to be seen. And I think you see Speaker Hakeem Jeffries talking about using a pardon in a very special way in special circumstances, but to get more people that have been unjustly prosecuted, examine those cases and use that pardoning power in a positive way that can help many people.
There are calls for Biden to keep the pardons coming. CNN contributor John Dean is calling on President Biden to issue a blanket pardon for DOJ officials who investigated or prosecuted Donald Trump. And there are reports today from Politico that Biden's team is discussing preemptive pardons to protect certain people from being potentially targeted by Donald Trump, including Dr. Anthony Fauci. You know, it's an extraordinary power to pardon someone. Do you agree? Just keep giving out, get out of jail cards.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting subject, one that our founding fathers in the United States had thought about, that when someone is unjustly prosecuted and circumstances change, that they have that ability. This is something governors have as well. And we haven't seen it used in this context. And now we see unprecedented events happening all the time. And I think it does deserve for farther conversation and discussion about how are pardons used now in the 21st century. Is it right? Is it just? And do there need to be certain restrictions put on these pardoning powers from executives across the country? I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's something that's up for discussion and one that does need to be further examined now that we see what President Biden has done, but also we're concerned about what can be done in the future. So
are you for preemptive pardons?
Not necessarily. I think we'd have to see the facts in that. I'm hopeful that there won't be a need for that because this is just a race to the bottom, an arms race in terms of where do you stop? Where do you draw the line? And I think that would be very dangerous. You start looking for people that had no pardon, and are they further scrutinized? So that could be a real dangerous arms race that I don't think would be appropriate to have, because the question is, where do you start? Where do you stop? And I think you could go on an endless journey of pardons and a real race to the bottom.
I want to talk to you about Joe Biden. He fell asleep today during a leaders' meeting in Angola. Look, there are plenty. I wanted to ask you if there are any Biden supporters left. I'm sure you're going to say that there are, but what do you make of him falling asleep at the table in front of the cameras? Is it disappointing for you?
Well, I think that this is something I hadn't seen yet. I wasn't aware of that. But look, President Biden, you've got to judge people on their results. And I know there's a lot of imaging and perception that is involved in politics. But now it's about what has this person done? And we have to look at the measure of why did he go to Angola? And it's a very historic trip and one that strengthens the ties between Angola and Africa and the United States. And so President Biden is trying to squeeze in as much as he can in his final few weeks in office. And I think he's making the best of it. So, a slip up like that, I'd have to see it in its context. But I think it doesn't outweigh the good work that he's doing in this diplomatic trip to Angola. That's extremely important to their country and to ours. And so I'm happy that the president is doing that. And maybe he's overworking himself, but he's got to do that in the final weeks of his tenure.
Look, we're still getting breakdowns of the US election result. Vice President Kamala Harris made history in the presidential election, but not the kind that she was hoping for. Kamala Harris became the first presidential candidate since 1932 to fail to flip a single county in the election. There are more than 3,000 counties. She couldn't flip one. What do you put this down to?
Well, look, hey, when you lose, you lose. And that's all there is to it. I think a lot of people have over-exaggerated the win by Donald Trump. I think it comes down to something like 230,000 votes between the battleground states that gave Donald Trump that victory. So, yes, he won the Electoral College. He won the popular vote by 1%. That's what it's looking like in the totals that are coming in. And right here in New York, where I'm from, we actually picked up 3 congressional seats in the House. So there were some bright spots, and I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We could look at probably a million different statistics from the election, and you take some wisdom from each of those stats. So look, the Democrats lost. I think we do need to regroup and figure out how we reach people and make sure that our message is crystal clear and what we stand for is making it clear to American families and it's not these distractions all over the place. So look, Kamala Harris ran, I think, a good campaign, but I think ultimately it was about that Republicans really had a message that fit on a bumper sticker and Democrats were busy explaining, much like we see incumbents around the world doing. When you have things like inflation, the headwinds are strong and it's a real hard campaign to win. So I think given the circumstances and the short campaign, Kamala Harris ran a campaign that she can be proud of.
Look, I know it's early days. What's next for the Democrats?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot in terms of the Democratic National Committee where they have their new chair. But more importantly, I think it's a time where Democrats really talk about what is the mouthpiece of the Democratic Party? What's the message that we want to send? And I think we're a big tent with many different ideas, but that's in our diversity is our strength, but it's really our unity that is our strength. And we've got to be united, even though we have differences of opinions, even as something as severe as this pardon for President Biden, we can't have this cancel culture where because of one action, we cancel someone and we don't allow them into our party. I think, look, we take people with their flaws and all, but united and together, we look at people in their entirety and lift them up and push them forward. So, hey, 2 years is a long time. That's when the midterms are happening. But I think if Democrats get their ship together and we tighten up our the way we're running things, it could be a high watermark for Republicans.
Democratic strategist and former New York State Senator David Carlucci, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Thanks.